Good morning to US, good afternoon in Europe. I think we have some people, according to the attendee list, some people from South Africa as well. Let me share my screen. And meanwhile, people will join us. This is Gülay Özkan speaking. I'm founder of GEDS Strategic Design Consultancy. Today we are going to talk about imagining the post-pandemic era. This is our second webinar. And then I'm lucky that Kristen Miller-Kelly from San Francisco will join us today. She's co-founder of Superhuman X, based in San Francisco again. And she's former managing director of design and innovation of Singularity University. And in our webinars, we are, naturally, as a strategic design consultancy, we are highly encouraging the interactions. Please make sure that you write your comments, questions on the chat panel. All interactions will be taken care of. Selan Seral, she's a quite cool designer. This is the only thing I'm allowed to say about her. So Selan will take care of the chat panel. And our agenda, we aim to finish in 50 minutes. We don't like long webinars. We want to be punctual as much as we can. We will introduce ourselves, and then I'll talk about the exponential problems with exponential solutions perspective, which is quite important in the pandemic context. And then Kristen and I will talk on the current status and new avenues for 10 minutes. And then we will have a Q&A session. This will take approximately 5 minutes. Then we will talk about the design tools and also frameworks that you can use in building your future scenarios. Then we will have another Q&A, and then we'll close. And again, we want to finish in 50 minutes. GEDS is a strategic design consultancy based in Istanbul. We utilize design-driven methodologies and tools to help brands create design-centric, user-centric, or human-centric, there are different terminologies, products, services, and strategies. We are a 12-year-old company. And we are happily have had clients in 3 continents. And then we have paired many international top-tier brands around the world. And currently we are funded by European Commission for Metro Life project. At Metro Life, we design and develop smart products for older people with 19 business partners. And our project is again funded by European Commission. And some notable mentions: last 6 months, we were awarded the Design Value Award at 2nd place in Boston in September by DMI. And also during the pandemic, we learned that we made the list of the best companies, top 100 companies in Turkey with female founders. This was quite motivating for us in these days. Now, Kristen will introduce the Superhuman X.
Hi, everyone. Good morning on the West Coast, if anybody was brave enough to wake up early with us, and good afternoon. Thanks for staying late I guess in Europe and in Istanbul. As Gülay mentioned, we've known each other for a few years and have talked about working together. So I'm super excited for this collaboration on this workshop. And really thank you for inviting me to be here, Gülay. So I recently started a company, co-founded a company called Superhuman X. Our motto is we make superhumans, not supercomputers. We're really all about using technology, leveraging technology to enable human potential and capabilities and extend them. So our mission is really to build solutions that for a radically inclusive kind of world. And what that means is, the radically inclusive part means that we don't want to leave people behind. We want to try to democratize technology, make it easy to use and accessible, and put humans at the center of computing. So next. So who we are is a small team of really passionate designers, strategists, and technologists that have decades of experience working in a variety of industries. Some notable clients we've worked with over the years are companies like Google, Microsoft, Whirlpool, Genentech, Steelcase, and then some nonprofits, amazing nonprofits like NASA, the World Food Program, DARPA. We've worked with the World Bank and many others. So really excited to be here and collaborate on this workshop. So back to you, Lori.
Yes, thanks, Kristen. Now I would like to ask, please tell us how we are feeling today. And would you please also share on the chat panel which countries and companies you are from? And of course, it would be nice to learn what are your expectations. So maybe you can write on the chat panel. Meanwhile, I'll just give a few seconds. I'll go back to our slides. And now I would like to talk about just 2-3 minutes on the exponential problems. Probably you have seen this graph quite many times last two, three years. And then we basically kept telling the organizations, brands, individuals, people that the exponential trends, exponential growth brought to some opportunities, advantages. And also we kind of criticized the linear thinking, linear growth, and then encourage the brands to build their structures that they can grow exponentially. But this same graph in this pandemic time brought a different perspective. Is basically this COVID-19 spreads in exponential growth, but whereas our response is linear, the government's response or the individual's response, company's response, they are all linear. So this has created, instead of creating some disruption of opportunities, this created a huge problem. So right now, this is mainly what we are indeed dealing about. So now Kristen and I will talk about the current status and new avenues. Each one of us will speak 10 minutes. I just would like to check the remove. Yeah, you can see it. At GEDS, sorry. At GEDS, we believe that our mission is in this type of crisis periods, understand the new context, and then build, make the new avenues visible to brands, individuals, and design new experiences and new experiences, maybe product strategies for the brands and again individuals. So what are these new contexts? And pandemic has become our mirror. It's indeed, it has made the invisible visible and showed us our blind spots. These blind spots are different in different countries. For example, in the States, it's probably the healthcare system. In China, maybe it's the tracking system. Maybe it can be considered a surveillance system. In Turkey, it can be maybe our economic system or the economic situation. So in different contexts, we have realized, in different societies, we have realized what our blind spots are. And now we are aware of the things that we were not aware before. For example, the food system, the discussions on food system is really interesting to follow these days. Basically, pandemic has started at the food market in China, mainly because we eat animals that we are not supposed to eat. And then pandemic also has showed us who consumers are, who producers are. Probably almost everyone on this call are consumers. And then another interesting discussion right now in Western Europe, that farm pickers of Western Europe are mostly from Eastern Europe. So how these people are going to Western Europe to pick the fruits and vegetables for the next 6 months? And then there were some ideas that they can fly to Western Europe. But then there's this question, are Western Europe's food supplies worth more than East Europe's workers' health? These farm pickers, they need to make a decision between their health and making a little money. Another question that we ask maybe these days, especially I do, at least, and what the governments are for. For example, in Boston, Danielle Skinny's total cost of COVID-19 treatment is $34,000. And again, in the States, 7.5 million small businesses are at risk of closing. But whereas in Europe, the situation is different. Germany provides 50 billion euros to small businesses, freelancers, and artists. The French government has again provided 110 billion emergency plan. So when this is the situation in your country, from different angles, we are all asking what the governments are for, why we are paying taxes, or which country or which government would you like to pay taxes maybe later? So these are the questions are raising these days. Another angle is growth. Maybe these days, I really realize that there are so many pointless things that I have that I don't need, especially during this time. So why we are buying this, why we are consuming all this? And the ecological economists already show that the continuous economic growth is not possible. So maybe if we consume less, then we need to produce less, then the growth is not going to create this much problem. And also experts agree that the climate change is related with growth as well. So if a pandemic creates this much problem in our lives, can you imagine what climate change can cause? I mean, I cannot even want to think about it. But at the same time, there are also some really nice things happening in all around the world. For example, people remember what solidarity means during the pandemic. People in Italy support each other with their songs, performances. In the UK, the young people build communities to help elderly people with their shopping, with their types of needs. Joe Wicks is an interesting example from the UK. He's basically a body coach, and his YouTube channel every day, 9 a.m., he has this exercise class, and millions of people exercising with him, including me. He has this very funny costumes on Fridays that he's just trying to cheer up people, and really, it's especially a Friday, it's really lovely to join him. And he shares his revenues from YouTube with the National Health Care System in the UK. And so far, he has raised 91,000 pounds. Another sweet story, again from the UK. Captain Tom Moore, he's 99 years old war veteran, who has raised 23.7 million for an NHS again by walking 100 laps of his garden. He completed the challenge on April 16 after walking 10 laps of his garden each day, aided by a walking frame. So this was really amazing, but he said that he is really overwhelmed. So these are the contexts. So what are the new avenues in these contexts? According to political scientist Evren Balta, she says that we don't know the new normal, as this will be shaped and defined by the people's response to the pandemic and the measures. Probably most of you, that's why you are on this call. Maybe you are wondering that we know the answer, but we don't know either, because as designers, we help people to discover these opportunities together, and we provide frameworks, tools for that. And we are at a crossroad. I mean, because there are in different examples I will give, there are different options, different dimensions look at the same thing. In my opinion, leaders' mission in this type of period is to show which way to go, and also to make this meaningful contexts more visible to people. So for example, tracking system. Tracking system can bring good opportunities for a healthy society. But at the same time, it can also be source of surveillance. So how do people and the government respond really will define its context. For example, in Europe, GDPR strictly defines these boundaries. So companies really, if they don't obey these rules, I mean, they get really big fine. And even I know that few American companies had to stop their operations in Europe just because of that. So these policies are really critical in this period. So as I said, growth is not something, not necessarily means civilization, modernization, better life. So getting out of this growth mindset is a new avenue right now. I highly encourage you to follow the growth discussions. I'm just very closely following, and it's really mind-opening. It's very inspiring. And with less consumption, less production, there's a world is possible a perspective. And then prioritizing democracy and well-being over profit is also possible in these economic systems. If you haven't heard the universal basic income, it's basically the government's, it suggests that the governments pay a certain amount of money to people's, for people's basic needs. Right now, government doesn't mention universal basic income, but this is what's happening in practice. In France, in Germany, the governments give a certain amount of money to people. And new lifestyles is also approaching. Of course, the maybe more organic and sincere, I would call. And it could possible that there would be more permaculture lifestyles, villages, maybe distributed work will allow us to move out to the cities, these mega cities, and build these villages, maybe small communities like in kibbutz in Israel case. And then, of course, in this context, in these new lifestyles, different value attached to getting together in the entertainment context is also very interesting to explore. So, as I said, there are new contexts, and these new contexts, there are new avenues possible. And in these new avenues, what type of experience brands can create? The Edelman Trust Barometer has this fascinating insights. Like 90% of people think that the brands must do everything they can to protect the well-being and financial security of their employees. And again, 90% of people think that the brands must partner with government and relief agencies to address the crisis. 71% of people think that the brands and companies, if they place their profits before people, the consumers will lose their trust them forever. And 33% of people think that if they convince that these brands not acting appropriately in response to pandemic, they will stop using them forever. So people are quite sensitive about how brands position themselves in these days. Another researcher comes from Helen Service Design Company. According to their research, 77% of consumers say that safety will be one of the most important factors when it comes to the choosing between service providers after the pandemic. Again, 44% of the consumers say that they would consider start using a service at an earlier stage if the service provider can prove that they have significantly improved or enhanced their customer safety. So when we look at these researches, it's very clearly say that the brands need to reposition themselves, they need to reconsider, redesign their products and services. So at GEDS, we believe that this is the golden age for creativity. New services, innovations, and strategies are needed, and the positioning, again, for brands. Understanding this new context from human-centric perspective is crucial, and the new winners will be the creative brands with strong execution skills. So there's a lot of room for creativity in this new domain. Now, Kristen will go over her slides, please.
Okay, thank you, Gülay. Could you go to the next one, please? I'm gonna have Gülay help me with the navigation here, so please be patient with us. So, as Gülay mentioned, all these changes are upon us, and I think the big question on everyone's mind is really what might the future look like? And I think that one way to look at it that's helpful for me is to think about pre-vaccine and post-vaccine. So once sort of, I think we're all across the globe here, we're sort of at slightly different cadence of lifting shelter and sort of quarantine restrictions. However, I think we are all kind of anticipating sort of this next level of being able to get out into the world. And what does that look like? And I think it's going to be different pre-vaccine and post-vaccine. Of course, nobody knows exactly when that will happen. And the experts are estimating 12 to 24 months or 18 to 24 months for a vaccine. So this new normal that we're going to live with, I think we're going to have to settle into for a little while. And as Ghislaine mentioned, our role really as designers is not to predict the future and to tell you what the answers are, because we don't know, obviously, but to really help you sort of with our tools, our toolkit and our design thinking tools and the whole design process to start to unpack some of what's happening and help to use our frameworks to project into the future what that might mean for you. So also I'm sorry, could you go back or forward one second?
Yeah.
So this is an amazing time. I really agree at Superhuman X, we really agree that it's kind of going to be a golden age. And, it's with there are a lot of difficulties. Obviously, this time is super challenging for really everyone, some more than others, but there are huge opportunities that come out of history has shown us that really challenging times and adversity have yielded pretty amazing innovations. World War II, for example, during that time, the need for the urgency around antibiotics yielded the sort of mass development and distribution of penicillin, the jet engine, as well as the very first computer, the Colossus Mark II. So what we're already seeing with this COVID-19 era is some really interesting innovations, just that because there's an urgency to innovate on the fly, smart thermometers that are inexpensive and accessible, all the test kits, all the ventilators and all the companies who are doing these incredible pivots to create solutions for the shortages we're experiencing around the globe. So kind of overall, I think what's really interesting, as Ghislaine explained, the exponential, is that we've all seen this exponential coming. We've all known that it's unpredictable, but we are in it now and we're in the midst of it. And so many of these trends that we've been tracking around online collaboration, remote working, working from home, telehealth, distance learning, and then leveraging robots for manufacturing lines to sort of take some of the burden off of humans. They're all coming to fruition now. There's a real urgency. So it's a really interesting time. Next. So again, sort of trying to unpack kind of how will our lives change in the nearer term, kind of pre-vaccine. For a while, as many experts agree that we'll be using face coverings and gloves, protective gear when we're out in public and socializing. Next, please. So there'll be, and again, Asia's a little bit ahead of us here, especially China. So what we're seeing is the need to kind of continue to monitor the situation, and we will be doing that because the expectation among, consensus among experts is that this will be coming back in fits and starts. So monitoring the spread of the virus is really important through temperature checks, blood samples, et cetera, and making sure that people are complying with the safety guidelines like wearing masks and gloves, et cetera. So next. And then of course, with this need to come back together and be physically present together, we're still gonna have to be safe. So sort of being together but separate and safe. We're seeing a lot of solutions coming up around glass panels in public spaces, as well as here in the US, there are glass panels between any teller or checker, any customer service person and the customer to keep them safe. I saw a really interesting new design for airplane seating, actually late last night, I meant to get it in here, but where the seats are sort of staggered and have glass panels between them. So I think what will be really interesting is to see kind of what innovations are inspired by this time that are actually better for everybody all the time, sort of this universal design principle that sometimes solving for these extreme conditions creates better solutions for everyone, even sort of in non-pandemic times. So next. So I think some of this is sort of reinforcing what Galea has already mentioned, but I think what are some really interesting trends that we're seeing. And some of our really long-held and deeply ingrained assumptions are being challenged right now, which is really interesting. There's a new need and a call for sort of authenticity. We're all sitting here in our homes. There's no pretense. I think this might be the third time I've put makeup on in the last five weeks or so. You might see my kids in the background. I can't pretend that I'm in this perfect environment and my life is perfect. We are experiencing, FOMO is irrelevant. We're all kind of experiencing different levels of the same thing at the same time. So that's an incredible way to induce empathy and connection between people. And there's this intimacy. Again, you're in my home. I'm in your home right now. I've done, rides or late night comedians and SNL, Saturday Night Live, is being broadcasted from the cast's home. So there is an incredible kind of intimacy to that I think really connects us. There's a need for human-centered solutions, as Galay mentioned. I mean, I think organizations really need to meet their customers where they are if they're going to stay relevant. So that means, addressing this elephant in the room and really speaking to their needs now. And I think and I'll go through some details or some examples later, but some organizations have really heeded that call. While there's sort of slow consumption of some resources, there's really fast growth for a lot of digital services, personal delivery, online platforms, working from home. Zoom, obviously, everybody knows, is being completely overloaded, so new solutions are popping up. And so we're having more conversations, we're having more interactions. We need to connect, so we're finding ways to do that, which I think is really interesting as well. And this sort of the lack of kind of consumption on the one hand of products and consumables, and also the lack of commuting and the increase in remote work is leading to a healthier planet. So that's a really positive outcome. Next. And so the future of work is one area. I'm going to kind of break this down into a few different areas that synthesizing this research that we've done. This is an interesting example of how some firms are thinking about redesigning spaces. So when we do go back to work, it's probably not going to be the same. There could be different solutions for distancing people physically in the space. There will certainly be more sanitized stations, hand washing, et cetera, including, and of course, masks and gloves, et cetera. So this is an interesting piece by a architecture firm in Amsterdam. Next, please. We're also anticipating, again, when we do go back, sort of alternating groups, everybody, large groups probably will not be gathering in the near term, pre-vaccine. And cocooning is back. So this cocooning is a term that was coined in the 1980s with the advent of the first home computer, the first home PC by IBM. And so that was a capability that became available, 40 years ago. However, now it's really just hitting the mainstream and ramping up. It was pretty progressive companies that were letting their employees sort of work remotely from home, but now it's becoming the norm. And some of these changes and these efficiencies, we don't expect them to go back completely, because there's, there are benefits. There's the intimacy, there's the increase in communication and collaboration, and there's the efficiency around time and commute. So much more integrated into our lives. And again, safety is going to continue to be a huge concern, at least until we come up with a viable vaccine. So next. So another big space that's being completely disrupted and affected is kind of retail and entertainment. I've grouped these together, even though they're a little bit different. But what we're seeing is, even in places where people are gathering in public, again, this is a Starbucks in Hong Kong, there are workarounds for trying to create that space that we need and that distancing. Again, we're going to see design, spaces that are built with that intent designed into it more and more. But we don't think this will go away until post vaccine. Next, please. And so again, we're seeing this incredible kind of boom and innovation around virtual events. I mean, sadly, many events have gone away or had to completely reinvent themselves, no pun intended, and to be viable online. But the platforms are growing and the solutions are very creative. I mean, there's discussions about professional sports and the baseball season continuing. Here in the US, baseball season's a really big deal. And for teams to still be able to play with no live spectators, but just have it all sort of digitally streaming, and incredible, again, creativity around bringing people together to experience art and perform together. The Toronto Symphony Orchestra had an incredible performance with 29 musicians who were all performing from their homes and bringing that together. So a lot of ingenuity and creativity. Again, like the late night shows I've really been enjoying, Stephen Colbert and others from their home. In some ways they're better. So you have to wonder, how much are we going to go back to the big fancy productions that are super costly? Sadly, I know a lot of people are losing their jobs, and that is not a small thing. But you know, I think that once we sort of get into this new territory, it's an interesting question to ask. You know, what are we going to keep, and what are we going to go back to? Business models are shifting in order to stay relevant and to stay to bring in revenue. Restaurants are delivering wine and selling it, you know, retail instead of the traditional markup. Family meals, they're putting together new innovative solutions. They're selling their groceries, they're selling their supplies, because that's what their customers need, and delivering them to their home. And so most of the experts agree that they're predicting that we will continue to be prepared, that being prepared is going to be a sort of a state of mind and a value, because we're going to be scared for a while, you know, even post-vaccine probably. Some of this hoarding will continue. There's going to be a distrust in the distribution channels, the traditional distribution channels, and some of those shelf-stable supplies will continue to be in high demand. So it's an interesting opportunity for people in that business. Next. And so another kind of category we're looking at is future of education. Again, highly impacted area. Most of the world is not in physical class right now. I don't think any, maybe some places in Asia. But so again, there are certain benefits to this. There are definitely challenges, and there are certain benefits. So this sort of Zoom classroom probably looks very familiar to most people. Next, please. So the future of, sorry, just one second. I am at home right now. Just 1 second. My family is awake. So the future of education, as my children are getting ready for their online school, there are a lot of experts who are wondering, will traditional higher education really come back? Or is it over? There's incredible convenience and efficiency. Of course, online platforms like Khan Academy and Coursera have been around for a while, and now, of course, they're gaining incredible adoption rates. There's a thinking around redesigning the calendar, particularly for kind of K through 12 schools here in the US. I think in different parts of the world, kids go to school year round. Here we typically have the summers off. There's a lot of discussion about, well, kids need to be in school all summer in anticipation of more school closures, sort of like building in time to the calendar to have those snow days that we have on the East Coast. And then, of course, sort of staggering the kids. How many people can be in a space at one time is going to be a big question. And then access is another big challenge, but opportunity as well. A lot of educators I know are being asked to build content and mini modules that are designed for smartphones for better accessibility for more places in the world. Next, please. And then, of course, last but certainly not least, most profoundly, the future of health and healthcare is being called into question and is completely changing and transforming in real time, as we all know. Next, please. So this is obviously still completely evolving and emerging and unfolding in real time, but you know, the experts and the partners and friends and clients that we have who are experiencing this are actually, you know, every single day reassessing sort of these very old and ingrained and hierarchical systems and protocols and innovating in real time. So this is an incredible transformation that's happening. It's really hard. I mean, we all know that, right? And so I think, you know, we're so much in the thick of it, but I think that now that we've gone there, we're probably not going to go back. So going to have to be major changes in the healthcare system. As we know, the sort of personal protective equipment is being innovated on the fly. Again, companies are converting manufacturing facilities to make, who used to make dishwashers to make ventilators now, or who used to make, you know, whiskey to make hand sanitizer. So amazing stuff happening there. Of course, in the background here in the US, we're regulated by our FDA, and we know also from our context there that there's a huge push to create more public and private partnerships to encourage rapid innovation and adoption of new therapies and diagnostics. So that'll be a really interesting thing to watch. There's a call for new digital solutions, actually, for some of the challenges that we're facing as a result of this kind of quarantining in mental health and substance abuse, et cetera. So, and again, the sort of obvious thing is that telemedicine is more common, especially for routine visits and non-urgent needs that are not pandemic related. So when you need to see your pediatrician or your physical therapist or your dermatologist, most of those appointments are happening online. And then, of course, the sort of drive-by clinics and all of that innovation is happening as well, which is pretty amazing. And again, it'll be interesting to see kind of as we get through this, what we assess that we need to keep and what we build on. So next, please. Okay, so that's all we have in the sort of categories of okay. That's our synthesis of our research thus far. Again, this is all happening in real time, and this is sort of a bit of a temperature check of where we are.
I think right now, if there are any questions, maybe we can get a few for Selan. She will be sending to. Is there any questions, Selan?
Yes, there is one question from Tolga about the future of governments. He wrote it in the chat panel. Maybe I can read it. Wondering government or political mode of new normal. Is it expected that globalization will slow down? Even European Union may dissolve. Autocratic and nationalist governments will be in power more. How are your opinions about future of governments?
Kristen?
So yeah, the globalization question is really interesting. I think we're seeing that here in the US quite a bit, is that this sort of, that's definitely being called into question as especially the supply chains have been disrupted. And these dependencies on foreign, having foreign access to resources is a pretty big issue right now. So I think that's, again, unfolding, but I imagine that there will be a call for more independence in that regard.
There are quite many opinion pieces going around, especially about globalization, because right now nobody exchange anything with anyone, and the having your local food, local manufacturing system, everything local becomes more critical. Of course, when the borders are open, things might go back to its previous model at a certain level, but for sure some things will stay more local. And also, of course, we are not the experts of political experts, so we cannot really say things about it. As I said in the beginning, we are mainly here to imagine all this scenario together with people and based on some data, and also we provide frameworks and tools. So what we are saying is just our personal opinion, so it cannot be really extended to more expert idea. And of course, there are a lot of concerns. We also hear about Italy's concerns about European Union, and also people do want to expect that the government's more distributed in the distributed model. But again, these things are all common discussions in pandemic right now. As I said, like, it shows us our blind spots now. We question a little bit more. Maybe this questioning will be at a certain level that the people will take some actions. And now we would like to talk about, as designers, this is one of our main contributions to efforts in general, about providing tools and the frameworks to help brands or individuals imagine this future, imagine these new opportunities. So, Kristen, you go first, please.
Okay, great. Yeah, so as Gule mentioned, like we are, I think we all feel the need to sort of do what we can and use our expertise to sort of contribute to solutions for this time, this problem. So we're really excited to collaborate on developing some content and some tools and frameworks for this sort of new futures workshop that we're collaborating on. Next, please. And again, these constraints lead to innovation. So how do you find the opportunities? How do you unpack that? Next, I'm going to run through a little bit quickly because I know we're short on time. Again, some really interesting solutions that have already come out of this and innovations to really meet customers where they are and fulfill these user needs are the pivots that are happening with restaurants selling groceries and factories being converted into ventilator and hand sanitizer manufacturing facilities. The plethora and range of online free classes from winemaking, cooking, exercise, as Gule mentioned, and of course webinars like we're doing today is really huge. So I think there's a lot of people who are trying to meet that call and just do what they can to help the community. And then some really interesting unlikely partnerships, I think you could say, between people like organizations like Apple and Google to help to join their forces in this effort to sort of to track the contact tracing. And then of course the sort of this call for community service and newfound interest, especially here in the United States. I think it's very interesting to see how much donations, volunteering, and fundraising are up for this. It's a pretty amazing thing. Next. And so what we do, again, is we use our toolkit. And the first thing we do is we look at the context and we look at framing the problem. Sort of what is the problem you want to solve? And that's what I really love, all the questions around kind of what are you looking at? Where's the opportunity? If we partner together, we'll really dig deeper into that. But some of the kind of context is about this sort of community effort, this newfound empathy, patience, and understanding, because we're all going through this sort of shared experience together. And I think, interestingly, kind of a new appreciation for science and respect for science, which is, could also translate into addressing the climate change problems that we're having. So some of the outstanding questions and challenges are really around kind of the isolation that we're in this period of quarantine and sheltering, and there are predictions that this increase in stress and isolation will lead to more domestic violence, depression, and substance abuse, and potentially suicide. So I think building solutions that can address some of this it's going to be a really important area to look at. As one of the questions attendees highlighted is this question around globalization. Will we become more hyper local or independent in terms of our supply chain? Are we too dependent on other countries for our resources? And a big one is travel for both pleasure and for work. How will the industry be impacted? Now that we're having these meetings, we are meeting across the globe. Do we really need to get on a plane and spend all that time and all that money to go see each other? Or is this just as effective? Is this, can we increase our communication this way? So I think those are some interesting questions to look at. Next, please. And just a high level overview of some of the tools that we can bring to the table that we think are particularly helpful, especially when we're looking at futures. In addition to the design research, which is kind of what we're doing now, we're immersing ourselves in the context and the user needs, doing ethnographic research, interviewing, understanding kind of the needs and behaviors, is creating future narrative. Big thing we do is we write stories to help imagine, to envision a strategy and create alignment around it. We also use tools like the implications wheel, which is like a disruption mapping tool to find what areas will be disrupted as a result, sort of unintended consequences and opportunities. We use science fiction a lot to inspire innovation, to make things that seem impossible or unimaginable imaginable and visualize. Science fiction's been a great kind of predictor and an inspiration for a lot of innovations we have now. I could talk about that a long time, some other time. The steep variables are sociological, technological, environmental, economic, and political factors that can help, like when you start to kind of put together a puzzle of what the future might look like. And then we have tools around when we're ideating on possible solutions, coming up with really shutting down sort of this critical part of our brain to help us think of big ideas. So those are just some of the tools that we bring to bear for these workshops. And, you know, I love to say one of my favorite quotes is, we can't predict the future, but the best way to predict the future is to help create it. That's attributed to Alan Kay, who is a Xerox PARC and Apple designer. He designed the first graphical user interface. So it takes a while to sort of make these plans and then work to bring them to life. So I'll pass it over to you, Gulay.
Yeah. Thank you, Kristen. Kristen, we have been talking about running this workshop, so it's in addition to what she said, basically defining these new contexts, new avenues, and the new experiences is the main perspective that what we do in these workshops, and this could be specifically industry specific. And like, let's say, what is the new context in healthcare, and what are the new avenues in healthcare? Is it based on safety? Is it based on community? And is it this new experience, new angle? Is it donation-based business models or share apps? So these are all with the co-creation methodologies can be, in addition to what Kristen listed as tools, co-creation methodologies are also very strong. I mean, we are quite experience on this, and then run co-creation these workshops tools in 9 countries in 7 languages last 3 years. So design research, I just want to make it a little bit more detail to contribute to what Christy said. It's a very strong tool to understand, empathize with people, especially in this new context right now, because this all new value system, new expectations changing. It's important to understand that it's not marketing research. Market research is useful for convergence, while design research is a material and source of inspiration and divergence, and then we need to have this divergence and understand this new context. And also, of course, there are different things. Basically, design research is to build empathy, market research is building understanding. It's different purposes. So right now, tapping into the willingness of the consumers to share is quite important. And based on these insights, we can indeed create some new experiences. So as designers, I'm sure Kristen will be also agree with me that we want to understand and define these new contexts, and then make these new avenues visible to individuals and brands, and then we build new experiences with co-creation tools or with different tool sets and frameworks. So this is more or less what we want to talk about today. It's almost an hour, including questions. I mean, we started almost 1 hour ago. So you are unmute. Yeah, here.
Okay, hi.
So maybe we take one more question and close. Selan, not to exceed our.
So I had one question sent from Amit Advani. They wrote, there is expert speculation that there are countries will suffer from rampant starvation due to the supply chain disruption, even in the near term. This is a priority for world citizens, and Gulay mentioned solidarity. How can we shift our focus from more first world problems to these that are necessary for sustenance of our neighbors?
It's a great question, and something I actually have been thinking about quite a bit. I worked with the World Food Program a fair amount, and the head of innovation there, I was just posting yesterday about what incredible challenge this is now for so many people being around the world who are now being thrust into hunger, basically. And so I think there's a call for innovation around that, for sure. And that's an area that I am interested in looking into. So, I mean, there are no answers right now, but I do think that it's a really important place to look. So, yeah, I think our discussion today is really, it is more focused on sort of how organizations and businesses can sort of continue to find opportunity, but that sort of public health issues are huge, and those are really important to us as well. So I would love to help think about how we can address those.
I think we cannot really shift. We cannot really force people to change their focus. Because your focus is based on your value system. I mean, what you value most, you focus on that most. So this is a period that where we revisit, rethink on our value system, because let's say if you're a CEO, if you're a driver, your driver's health is also defines your health. So in a way, during this pandemic, we realized that we are connected, and then we cannot talk about individuals' health, individuals' prosperity. Either we have prosperity and health altogether, or we don't. So I think this context right now forcing people this solidarity context more. And then I sincerely hope that this will also make people think about this value system more. I think I'm expecting that, and also hoping that our focus will naturally will switch to this let's say less popular problems right now. I mean, it used to be more, let's say, the first world problems, but I think it will naturally. So I think we should slowly close the session. Thanks very much. This was our second webinar. And our third webinar, we are going to email you. And we usually hold one webinar in a month. And Kristen, thanks so much for joining us. Thank you. You wake up very early for us. Thank you. I know she doesn't like that much, but thanks. So if you have any questions, please email us. This is our email, and also the contact information, and also you can also reach us through Eventbrite. Thank you very much again, and then have a nice day or have a nice evening. Depends on where you are. Okay, thank you.